to the bond issue. And if you do, I'm going to ask you to go to that microphone, identify yourself, and then you can speak. No one wants to speak? Joe Guthrie, you're recognized to speak.
I looked around and didn't see anybody put their hand up, so here I am again. Seems like you could get this brochure, and I think you pretty much almost did it and just repeat it every year. I think the principal was right when he said you can't put off what you have to do today because tomorrow it's going to grab you. And I just like to, I really feel that this whole issue, unfortunately, is just about money. There's no question, I don't think, in my mind, and I think in most people's mind, at least more than half of the people in Hampstead realize there is a need. I mean, if you just look at the deficiencies that are listed, those alone, I mean, they're not going to go away. I have a kind of a vested interest because I'm going to hold the school committee's feet to the fire somewhat if we get this, and you let us get some programs in here for us. And that's, you know, how I feel about what we should be doing for our seniors. And I think for short term, I think we're depending on the school system and the library to give us at least a hand up in providing some programs for our seniors. So I like the fact that that's one of the bullets here. But we're sending our kids into a school without a sprinkler system. I mean, I don't have any children. I don't have any great-grandchildren, in fact, in Hampstead. But I have great-grandkids, and I wouldn't want them to go to a school without a sprinkler system. And, I mean, undersized classroom, we can argue about that, how big a classroom should be, but, you know, if you're going to fix the school, that's the time to fix it. And I just think that the need has been expressed. And I would suggest to you that it's all about money. And if you look at the almost $8 million, that really takes you back. I mean, that's more than the cost for a house today. And some of us are having to buy homes that are $300,000 and $400,000 homes, just a regular home. And but $8 million, I mean, nobody's going to vote for $8 million. But I'd suggest that the way that the school has broken it down on a monthly rate. I mean, I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income. I'm fortunate enough to live in a low-value home, but relatively speaking, the impact on me is going to be as much as it is for somebody who lives in a $300,000, $400,000 home and can afford that house. So I think we all have to look at what we can spend and whether or not you can afford. Well, I got to pick it up on my eyeglass here. Looks like almost $4.50 for a $100,000 home, almost $9 for a $200,000 home, and almost $18 for a $400,000 home. I know that's a long period of time, but I mean, I think that's what we ought to focus on. And I'll tell you, we've got to get a bigger turnout. And those people who are sitting home tonight, I hope they're watching TV because there's not too many of them here, unfortunately. But we live in a bedroom community. And our parents come home. It's a hard time to get people to come out to vote. And I think just there's not enough mom and dads for the central school to come out to do this. We got, what did we get, 51% last time, I think? Do you remember what the number was? Something like 51%? That means a majority of the people recognize that this stuff is not going to go away and that we really ought to do something about it. And if we can look at our own budgets, I'd hope that enough of us can come up with the dollars in our budget, and we can afford to go forward and do this. Because if we don't, as the principal said, It's just going to deteriorate. We're going to be back, and maybe you'll be so embarrassed not to come back next year. I don't know how you do it, but you might have to wait 4 or 5 years, and I don't know how long the list will be. But we're just putting off what we're going to have to do eventually. So I don't know, I wish I knew what the answer was. But if I could have just a minute regarding that, we got a couple of bills up in the House, and they are going to allow people to vote absentee ballots for any reason. Now it's kind of a close call on what you need for a reason, but I suggest that anybody who's at home taking care of their little boy and little girl, that's a legitimate reason for getting an absentee ballot. And if you get in touch with me, I'll get you an absentee ballot. And people should not be staying home just because there's some hardship or some, I don't even like to give it a name, but like I said, we're a bedroom community. Our people are used to letting somebody else do their work for them. And I think that's the way it is. So I challenge the people out there that didn't vote last time and recognize that we do need this, if for no other reason, that we're going to have to do it sometime. And you're going to have to pay the bill sometime. Now, at my age, I don't have to worry about it too much because maybe 10 years I don't expect to be around, but there are a lot of people that are going to be around. And just because your child is not in the central school is not a reason not to take care of a real, one of our gems in the town. We don't have too many public buildings. We only have 2 schools to take care of. I think we ought to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else want to speak to Article 2? Just go to the microphone, state your name and where you live.
Hi, I'm Diana Abbey-Rad. I live in Hampstead. So I just briefly want to share a perspective that's helped me. So recently there was a sample poll done in a community Facebook group called Hampstead, New Hampshire Community Connection. And I mean, it was a small sample, but still the question was, why do people, there were about 4 options, why do people move to Hampstead? And the majority was for the schools. So I would invite people to look at how it can be a win-win, a win for the town, investment long-term, a win for the school, for the teachers, for the welfare of our children. And if we look at, excuse me, I'll just get my thoughts. So do the quality of our schools equal security of home value? And I just feel like that is a win-win for everybody to consider. Like, it's not going away, the problems that have been presented for the school. Are we just going to keep putting Band-Aids on until eventually, who knows, a security tragedy happens, or just like the kids are in extreme heat or extreme cold? Like, what's the solution for the people that are voting no? Like, it just seems like it's been a revised plan over the years. It's been cut back, it appears, and it just seems like, from my understanding, it just sounds like a quality investment that's going to make the school solid, possibly for another 50 years. I can't quite remember the estimate that I'd heard. And then just to wrap it up, I'm also not sure if people are aware that there are like tax exemptions through the town. If you're married, if you're single, if you earn under a certain income, if you're a veteran, if you're, you just need to go to the town hall and you file by April 15th. So there's those options. And then finally, so just a little bit about my personal history. I asked around a lot of, like, before we moved to Hampstead, like, schools was a priority. And it just had a really good reputation for the value of a house. And my son is graduating Central School this year, my youngest. My oldest is in Pinkerton now. And I have been so moved by the quality and the dedication of the teachers. that I just feel it takes a village to raise a child, and those teachers have been my village. And I feel like, how can we give back? Like, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a community to care about our schools. It takes a community to care about our schools. And yeah, I mean, just on maybe a final note, you know, it's been presented, the admin office should ideally be in the front of the building. Like, yeah, that's just, you know, I mean, obviously all the other like important needs that were mentioned as well. So, and yeah, and just let's try and increase the voter turnout. It seems like it's in the early 20s. Like, talk to your neighbors, bring friends to the polls, like, educate each other. Just, you know, take a tour. And one final thing. If people aren't aware, it's a bond over 20 years, which I feel like helps spread the responsibility for people moving to Hampstead, moving out of Hampstead. Like, it's over 20 years, like it's a shared responsibility. And I just feel like our children and our teachers deserve it. And I'm so grateful for the dedication of the teachers, and that's my passion for why I'm speaking right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue? Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jen Abbott. I live 132 Main Street. One, I'm nervous. I'm going to try not to stumble over myself. Essentially, this has been up quite a bit, and so I've talked with my neighbors since I've moved here, trying to figure it out. I personally think that it's your right to vote and you have a choice. I ask that you be informed and make that choice based on fact, not assumption. So I do encourage all voters to do their best to find information to be an informed voter. But if you vote differently than me, that's fine, because we all have different values. Personally, I value education. I value being proactive. I would throw all the money in the world at education if I could and would. So that's where I stand. However, I know some people maybe don't have the same beliefs as I. But I do think, talking with the community, there are some very clear things that people are in support of. People do feel that children shouldn't be in classrooms where the temperature is so drastic, where it's very, very cold or very, very hot. I think people do agree that our children in the kindergarten wings should not be inhaling fumes from car exhaust, that there's no filter there. I think quite a few people believe there should be a fire sprinkler system. I think some people get annoyed that you can't walk in and find an office, especially visitors. I think that people would enjoy more bathrooms. I think people would, especially me personally, because kids need to wash their hands. And who here can agree that there are a lot of illness that goes through a central school? And if they could wash their hands more, because kids are lazy, and if it's hard, they're not going to do it. And if they had more sinks, they might actually wash their hands more often. That's just me, but also just the fact that they should be able to use a bathroom easily. But these are just some things that I think a lot of families could agree with. Now, looking at this plan, some people may not do their due diligence, and they're going to say they're asking for too much. We don't need a new library. We don't need a new awesome cafeteria. It doesn't have to be perfect. And so my question for you, because I've asked this question personally, is why is it important or in our best interest to make this school the way we would like? Why is this cost effective? Caitlin, I'm asking you if you could.
Recognize Caitlin to speak.
I have two, great. Thank you. One, I would, after I'm done, maybe having some of our construction people just give a quick answer on it. But really what it comes down to is this is the most cost-effective way to do this. As we've talked about, we're not even just planning for 10 years down the line. We're doing that as well, but we're also meeting the needs of tomorrow being literally tomorrow. From what Mr. Collins said, I think I'm probably going to reiterate a lot of what he already pointed out, but we are out of options and we're out of space. So doing this all now is really what needs to be done now. rather than splitting it up and doing little pieces over time, it's gonna cost us more. And that's what it comes down to. I don't know if we can recognize, Jason.
Someone else want to be recognized? You want Jason recognized to speak?
So, I would just add a couple of things, and actually specific to the couple of points that you mentioned is, one, with regard to the library, it's not so much, we didn't enter it into with the goal of creating a new library as much as the library was never a library. It was 2 classrooms, and we converted it to a library. So from a construction standpoint, it was easiest to convert it back to those classrooms and then have a library as part of where we would have, if we had left the library where it was, we'd still need those classrooms, and so we'd have to build them. So it was easier to convert it back. Regarding the cafeteria, we don't have a cafeteria. We have a gym that we use as a cafeteria, and for the middle part of the day, anybody that's ever been over to the Central School, we have gym class in half a gym for a good chunk of the day, because we've converted the other half into a cafeteria. That's where the kids are eating. So we don't actually have a cafeteria. We have a gym that we repurpose for a cafeteria for a good chunk of the day. This is to give us a cafeteria so that we can actually use the gym for its intended purpose for the entirety of the day. So some of these things are, I've looked at some of these things as very practical. When you start thinking about it, you're like, oh yeah, we actually only use half the gym because we can't use the whole, because the other half is being used as a cafeteria. So some of them are really on a very practical level.
Recognize, Madam Chairman.
Also, talking about the rooms, people keep talking about the music room. I don't know if people really realize that we at Central School never had a dedicated music room. It started out on the stage. There was never a room dedicated for music and chorus. It was on the stage, and then when we could no longer use the stage, it was moved to the portable. When we brought the kids in, it's now back up on the stage. So even when the addition was built in '87, we never had a music room. So that's something that we really need to look at. It's not like, we've never had one, so we really need a dedicated music room in there for that. And I just want to mention that to Mr. Guthrie's remark. I don't think this board, or the board coming up, we're not going to go away. I don't think we can go to sleep for 4 to 5 years and bring this program back and try to get this passed. One reason is because the board really has a responsibility to make sure that our kids are in a safe environment that's conducive to learning. And whether it gets voted down or not, we're going to be back again, because we have a responsibility to keep trying to do what's right for the kids in the town. The only thing that's going to change is the price is going to keep going up. And at some point, people in town are going to wake up and say, we have to do something. So it's really better, do it now at this cost, because I don't think you can make everybody happy. The people who are voting no have been voting no for the last 10 or 12 years, and the price was never right. When it was $4 million, it wasn't right. When it was $6 million, it wasn't right. When there were 4 classrooms in a music room, it wasn't right. There's always going to be a population in this town that just aren't going to agree with the fact that we need this. So we're going to have to keep moving forward with the design plan that we have, that we know that is workable and that is needed for the kids in the town. And this one especially brings in the whole community. Residents, seniors will be able to use this. And so we're going to go forward with this. Even next year, I don't see any changes to this, because this is really an optimum design, a flexible design that can be modified for different uses over the years. So I just wanted to mention that. If anyone thinks we're going away, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the design plan's going to change. As I said, the only thing that's going to change, it's going to cost more when it happens. Okay, thanks.
Do you want to speak further, ma'am?
No, so it sounds like what I'm hearing is this is the most efficient way to meet the needs of both the school as well as the community. Sound good? And I would just add that I think sometimes people don't quite understand how the bond works. The most this bond would ever cost is, let's say you live in a $400,000 home, is going to be $23.16. That's for the first year. And then it's going to drop each year until it's the lowest amount. On average, you'll spend $17.82 a month. So I'm not good at math, but that's like $300. And I think getting an amazing school to meet and match the amazing teachers as well as staff that we have with our students is definitely worthwhile. So that's all. And I would just encourage, I know this isn't about the bond, but maybe when the budget comes up, if you could be able to explain the increase in terms of a monthly amount.
We'll talk about that when that warrant article comes up. Anybody else want to speak to the bond issue, the 20-year bond? Jay Demando, you've been raising your hand.
Hi, Jay Demando, Hempstead. I have a question about the design. If you can help me follow this, then I'll understand it better. According to what I'm looking at this, by moving the library into the new library, we're going to be gaining 2 classrooms, and we'll gain 2 classrooms over the music room. Is that right?
The two new,
Caitlin, you recognize this speak?
sorry,
So those are the
That's
4 new
associated
classes. Right?
can we have,
That's what we're
If
getting.
you want to
And-
speak, you have to come to the
They'll
microphone.
do it.
Pardon me?
If someone wants to speak, they have to go to the
Okay.
microphone and be recognized.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Jones, I think we'd like to answer your question, Jay.
Sure,
I think he's the most qualified.
works for me.
So there will be 2 new classrooms over top of the library,
Yep,
and there will be two classrooms gained by moving the library
right.
to its additional space. And then there's just some other shifting around, but those are essentially the 2 new classrooms,
Right,
or the 4 new
the
classrooms.
4
that
new
we're-
classrooms. And when we were in Hampstead at our largest population, we brought in 3 portables, which had 2 classrooms in each trailer. So that's 6 classrooms we just got rid of. Mr. Collins just got up and was talking about the central school and was saying how the population is starting to increase. Now, when the portables left, we got rid of 6. If we do this, we're gaining 4 of those 6. We're still short. So I don't see how this is going to be the answer for years to come. Do you think we're going to need another addition if population still increases?
We looked.
I'm talking,
well,
I'm not talking like the classroom for a music room or the classroom for a library, because those are specific.
right, but you have to remember that a whole portable was being used for music, so 2
No,
classrooms.
not in the beginning.
I'm talking about currently our most
Right.
recent, and
That's
for
true.
several years. Yes, if we can
However,
have,
when we were at our highest population, when we were talking about a 3rd school over at Depot Road, we had kids in every portable for classrooms.
we're gonna have
I think
Mr.
Mr. Collins
Collins
would
speak.
like to address your question.
Sure.
Good situation.
I want to point you to a couple of things in here that work that's happening. Those 3 undersized classrooms that I spoke in the oldest portion of the building,
Right.
those 3 rooms are going to become 2 rooms in the renovation design that's in there. So you can actually see that if you look at the
Right, and one of
the
them is a
schematic. So
classroom.
there's
One at a
a
time.
net loss of 1 classroom when I did that count. The second thing is, if you notice the classroom, which is actually the one directly across from the current central school office, you will see that that classroom gets carved up because we needed to create a stairwell. So when I did that number that said we have a net gain of 2, you said 4, you're right, but 2 of what was the 4 are disappearing because of, the carving up the 3 into 2. That's a net loss of 1 of them. And the classroom, if you look at it, it's at the corner of the courtyard. You can see if you're looking at that design in the lower schematic, it's got the purplish color there.
Is that, how big is that?
That is currently a
enough?
first-grade classroom, and what'll happen is you're carving a standard hallway through it, and then the remainder of that's gonna be 2 small instructional spaces that'll be used for however we decide is important at that time.
Right, but not a classroom, so we're
Correct.
still
It would not be
short.
a classroom.
Okay.
So that's a net gain of 2 classrooms.
Yeah.
And back to what you were saying, yes, there were 6 classrooms that were in the portal that were being
Yeah,
used,
yeah.
but our population was around 500 and, I'm going
huge,
to, off the
yeah.
top of my head, somewhere in the vicinity of 560 to 570. So we had significantly more children spread out in those portables.
Right,
And you are right that
it's
music
going
was.
back up, you
Yes.
said.
Well, I don't think the projections suggest we're going to go there. if you look out, it does not suggest that.
Okay. I was just wondering if you foresee an addition on top of this to accommodate those classrooms that were not.
No.
Okay. And I just want to remind the board that I think in the town, if we should all work together, and if we had supported the citizens petition 3 years ago for the sprinklers and for fixing the wing, at least that would be done by now. I know the whole addition wouldn't be, but it would have been something. And I think rather than campaigning against it, because it wasn't a school thing, just work together. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue?
Mr. Moderator?
Go ahead.
I'll just
Jason,
speak
you
to-
recognize to speak?
Yeah, so I'll just speak to the point, because we did have this discussion, and I think for those that are, relatively new to this process, maybe just getting involved and looking at Article 2, I just highlight a couple of things like that we have come up over the years. Is one, the initial proposal that we brought forward for the original Article 2 several years ago was significantly more than this, and so over time we've actually scaled back what we've done, and from a design perspective, pretty significantly to really get it down to what we absolutely had to have. The other thing that we did in recent years is that we went to a 20-year bond to lessen any one-year impact on any of the taxpayers. So we heard from taxpayers that a 10-year bond maybe was too much of a tax impact, on an annualized basis, and so we looked at it and we went to a 20-year bond. So that was another change. When we went to the 20-year bond, the question that the board asked at the time when we were evaluating it was, to Jay's point was, and Mr. Murphy, actually, we had this discussion, I think, last year or the year before, was would there then be a need for another bond while we're still paying this one off? And based on the NASDAQ projected enrollments moving forward, and obviously there's some variability the further out you get, but based on the projected enrollments, we felt like 20 years we could get out of this bond. Now, obviously, there could be a massive population explosion that no one sees coming, but based on the most current projections that we have, we felt like the 20-year bond we would be covered in that. And then the final thing was the question about doing it as the petition had asked, sort of in a piecemeal format, where you do the sprinklers and maybe the security piece. And one of the things that we heard from our construction folks last year is they went into it and they discussed how it's really the most expensive and least efficient way to do these kinds of things. If you were doing a renovation to your home or if you wanted to put an addition on your home, you don't do it one room and then stop and then next year come back and put another room on. The most efficient way is to package it together for economies of scale, for construction fees, and for a lot of other reasons that were explained. And that was really the genesis of that one, was that it was not an efficient way, and it was not responsible for us as we looked towards the taxpayers to do that, because we knew it would be the most expensive way to get this work done.
Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue? Mr. Blaska. Mr. Blaska, the elder. I see the youngers over there, too.
Yeah, he's here also. I think one of the things that some people may be not recognizing is that this is a physical asset of the town. We spend money to repair our roofs in our homes. We put new kitchens in, we put new floors in, we put tires in our cars, new tires in our cars, we fix the brakes, we fix the exhaust systems, we take care of all those things on a regular basis. We don't wait, well, some of us do. We don't wait till they've completely collapsed, and then of course we're stuck with a big bill, which is what I, as someone who is now on Social Security, don't want to see in the future. I'm really concerned that we're going to kick it down the road. We've been kicking it down the road for at least 10 years, and it's not getting any cheaper, and it's not going to get any cheaper. And just one little point, I think, on that issue of the citizens petition a few years ago. I believe, Mr. Mondo, that you actually voted on the board to vote for the one that we had as a board position. So I don't know why we'd want to vote for the citizen position if we actually supported if you actually supported what the board did. So anyway, it's just a comment on what happened in the past. So I really hope that we do that. And in fact, for the baby boomers like myself, I hope that we follow behind it. I've never put any children in the school system. I do have grandchildren in the system, and I do have a grandson who sits in a closet getting special ed, some speech therapy, so I'd hate to see that continue. And I hope that the greatest generation steps up to that name of greatest generation and votes for this.
Thank you, Mr. Plasko. Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue?
Oh, the bond issue?
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, sorry. I think the fact that it's 20 years and it brought the cost down from the last time, is what's important. You know, you sit back and you take a look at this. Some of these, for people who may have children, let's face it, a $400,000 home, that's 2 lift tickets at Loon, if you go to Loon, or 2 tickets to the Red Sox and a couple of brews and maybe a hot dog, and parking. So it's really, you know, that's really not a lot of money over a whole year. So I think it's good. I think it's a good deal for 20 years.
Thank you, Mr. Plasko. Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue? I see a couple of hands raised. Why don't you identify yourself and tell us where you live in Hampstead?
I'm Mike Fleming, and I live at 16 Pentucket Drive. So I'm new to the community. When we were looking for community, we were looking for schools, safe environment, and location to work. And so looking at our schools, we looked at several other communities in the area where we drove up to the school and we sat and watched the schools. And as I watched some of the schools in the neighboring towns, I was like, you know what? I don't want my kids to go to that school. They were in really good schools, and so we moved to this community for the schools. And as the schools start to deteriorate and they're not maintained, that's going to start impacting people's home value for their houses. So if they're planning on retiring and moving to sunny Florida where it's warm all the time, they may not be able to get the return on their house that they would like. And so it's important to also look at how that affects them as individual households, as well as the house affecting the community. And as I was looking through the numbers and looking at the efficiencies that would be gained, I was wondering what the projections were made on the operating cost of the school with renovations versus what their current operating costs are today.
Is that a question? You want to answer?
Question.
Someone want to answer that in the
Can
school board?
Craig speak to that? Yeah.
Caitlin, go.
We do have that.
This,
Has that.
Craig was going to answer that question for you.
Yeah, we looked at the efficiencies, and we had to make some guesstimates, obviously, but we can tell how much money is just going out the walls in that 60s wing. And if we bring the full efficiency back to the 60s wing and build a tight envelope, which we would in all of the new structures with new HVAC, it was going to be a very minimal impact in terms of operating costs. It was going to be very close to the same cost to heat and cool the building today as it would be in the future, just by gaining the efficiency. It's certainly going to be a little bit more, but we're going to be gaining a lot of efficiency. It isn't like we're building, we're building about a third bigger than what the school currently is. It's not that the operating costs are going to go up that much. They're just going up a minimal amount.
Yeah. So with the increased efficiencies and the increased square footage of the school, the operating costs will be minimal or about the same?
About the same, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, Kathleen wants to be recognized.
Just based off of last year's information, so this is last year's heating costs, electricity costs. It was predicted, it was estimated that it was $1 per square foot per year for the portable classrooms. The existing building costs 50 cents per square foot. And then once the improvements are completed, it would be 40 cents per square foot. And at that point in time, it was actually going to cost less to heat the larger school building than what we're currently paying.
Okay. And I have one more question. Has anyone done a risk analysis to see what kind of liable lawsuits we may be having kids in those cold classrooms or hot classrooms as a risk to the community for a lawsuit?
No, the
So-
answer is no, we have not done that.
Because that's an important thing to look at what kind of exposure we have as a community, right?
We will now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue?
you got someone in the,
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Come on up. Please state your name and where you live in Hampstead.
My name's Chris Podesta, 15 Pentucket Drive. Most of what I was going to say has already been said. I agree with a lot of what the people said before me. I want to thank the board for voting 5-0 for this. Your words that we're going to be back here next year, I think that's great. Thank you to Mr. Collins and all the work of the teachers at the school, because I have 3 kids. One of them is in kindergarten. He's been in the school for 2 years through preschool and kindergarten. We've been nothing but happy with the people and all the service that he's gotten there. But I think it's good people propping up that building. And I think the longer you wait, just like your house, if you wait 30 years to do your roof, you're gonna get leaks. If you don't repair your car, it's gonna break down on you. And the longer we wait, the worse it's gonna be. I work for an urban high school in Massachusetts. This school will make the news. They closed because of gas leaks and lost heat and frozen pipes and issues that, frankly, I would be embarrassed to send my kids to that school, which makes me feel negligent for sending my kids to this school, not because of the people, but because of the building. So this is our 3rd year being here. We voted yes for this 2 years. We'll keep coming back year after year. We're going to vote for this because this should happen. And I guess I just had one question. I was curious why this vote requires a 3/5 vote instead of a simple majority vote.
Why does it require 3/5? Because we're buying, is that what your
Yes,
question?
yes.
Because we're binding the town into the future for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So it requires a supermajority, not just a majority. Because it's a bond, because it's good for the next 20 years. We're binding future voters.
Mr. Moderator, if
Go
I could
ahead,
just add
Jason.
something too. So, the moderator is absolutely correct. So we're proposing this as a bond. The alternative, which actually the police station ultimately went through, was the alternative is to do it as a one and done, which would mean that the entire tax impact would hit the town in a single year. If we did that, then it would only require a 50% vote at that point, or 50% plus 1. That's the majority vote. Now, the board has never endorsed that because the tax impact would be massive compared to the 20-year bond. So that's why it's a 2/3 vote, and that's why we're looking at a bond as opposed to a single year impact.
Okay. So I'll just close with, I would ask everyone here, everyone watching, get out there and vote. I can't think of a more worthy cause than the education of our children. And I can't thank the people that work at the school enough, because the people at the school are fantastic. And thank you.
Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue? Young Mr. Blaska. Or younger.
Don Blaska, Quail Run here in Hampstead. I don't have any kids in the Central School anymore. My kids are in middle school or Pinkerton. I'm supporting Article 2. Our town needs to continue to repair, renovate, and fix our infrastructure. As mentioned earlier, we don't have many public buildings, but we can't let them deteriorate. I saw something on social media this past week. Obviously, the Patriots won the Super Bowl, so I'm going to use a sports analogy. They had a picture showing that Gronkowski, Edelman, and Stoney Mitchell were watching TV, watching Tom Brady win his first Super Bowl 17 years ago. Gronk was 15, Edelman was 12, Stoney Mitchell was 6. When we did the 1989 addition to the Hampstead Central School, Tom Brady was 11. Let that sink in. He's 41 and just won his 6th Super Bowl. We shouldn't wait that long to do another addition to renovate and fix our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue? I'll look closely, make sure there's nobody else left.
I would,
Go ahead.
I would feel bad if I did not say something tonight. I go to a lot of meetings at work, and I try not to restate what's already been said. But Joe talked about bigger turnout. 2018, school voting, 22.6% of the town voted. 2017, 25.12%. 2016 presidential election, 82.1% voted. 2012, 83%. So people can turn out when they want to. So what's my ask? Many people already spoke about it. I appreciate everybody coming here tonight. There's not a lot of people from town here tonight. And I know people could come. They have their reasons why they didn't. I'm going to ask you to participate. If you can share information with a neighbor, a spouse, a child that can vote, your neighbor, at the pickup line, at dance contest, please share it. Help us get out the vote. The second thing I want to talk about is Joe talked about money. It probably is about money. But what's the truth? It's not $8 million. It's $16 or $17 a month if you have a $300,000 house. That's really what it is. You heard other people talk about it. It's peanuts for mostly everybody in town. Third, what I wanted to say, people move here for the schools. We talked about schools and return on investment on your house. The schools in Hampstead or anywhere, they're not 9 to 3:30 babysitters. Are precious little beings. My little son and daughter, your kids and grandkids, they go to these schools. They want to be gym teachers and superintendents and lawyers and nurses and doctors and engineers. This isn't about resale value. It's about children and learning in an environment where they can learn. So, you know, voting is important, but participating, okay? Not just coming here tonight. Share it with your neighbor, talk to them, bring people to the polls, hand out literature, get involved, knock on a door. Because when we knocked on doors last time, it was the same 10 or 11 people that knocked on doors the time before that. We need people to participate and get this turnout from 22.6% a little higher so we can go over the 3/5 and bring this home for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say, I'm the one who counts the votes. I think your statistics are a little low, although there's a much higher vote for presidential turnout for elections, that's for sure. But I think we have a little more than what you suggested as the percentage. But that's my own observations when I do the tally. So anybody else want to speak to Article 2, the bond issue? Someone else want to speak? I see a hand raised down here.
Hi, I'm Sarah Shields. I live at 74 East Road. It seems a lot louder when you're up here, so hopefully it's not too loud back there as well. I just had a couple questions. I really appreciate the recent influx of information. Previous to just even a few months ago, I wasn't aware of all of the plan changes that were actually occurring. I knew it was something that was on the articles for the last few years that I've lived here. It's only been 3 years now. But I really want to say that I appreciate the influx of new information that's been available on Facebook, but I had some questions on if any other information may be available. For example, we have all these, they're kind of like blueprints, but mostly overall site examples for the changes. Is it possible to get the actual blueprint information so that somebody who was actually interested in that type of information would be able to look at things like square footage and different resource allocation as far as that was concerned?
Haven't they done it in a presentation?
This is the first presentation I was aware of and that I came to. So that was just a question that I wasn't sure if there was a possibility for that information to be available either on a website or it's just someplace.
Caitlin, you recognize to speak?
I don't know about specific blueprints. I would have to ask about how, we may not actually have specific blueprints yet with all of the details. However, the school district website has lots more information than just this.
Right.
Some of it is, you know, a lot of it is based on these presentations, but the school district website has a lot of information on it. HampsteadSchools.net for anyone who, not any, oh, sorry, wait, I'm sorry.
There's a link, I think, on the town website. So
There is,
yeah.
there is, I'm sorry. I don't want to give you the wrong one. I don't know if Craig can speak to. Gino, sorry, I'm sorry.
Gino, you recognize to speak to answer this lady's question.
For those who don't know me, I'm Gino Baroni from Trident Project Advantage Group. We're the owner's project managers, ensuring that the taxpayer gets the most benefit of your tax dollars. So we've been engaged to oversee the design and construction of this project. The school board wisely has chosen not to do full designs prior to getting approval. You don't want to spend whatever it is. If it doesn't get voted, you throw the stuff away. So what you have now is a very thoughtful, it's 2 years now this information is out there, very thoughtful consideration of what is needed and it's in pretty good form if you look at this. You don't have physical drawings yet, because it costs money to put those drawings together. So again, we've had other towns who have gone, spent the money, went to town vote, spent $1 million and said, the school's bigger than this, by the way, and the money's lost. So the way we're doing it right now really is to try to give you as much information in a conceptual point of view that shows you the adjacency, shows you the square footages, shows you the intent of what's going to be spent. If, and I hope it happens this year, it goes to positive vote, then the money becomes hard and we start spending the money wisely. So you're not going to see real blueprints right now.
Does anybody have?
I have one additional question that actually.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I went to school for architectural engineering, so I'm a nuclear engineer now. I do this stuff. My question is, has there been any thought into the design process for possible expansion later to address the concerns of others in the community? So when you go into a project like this, which is great, even just having the possibility of expansion later that wouldn't be as costly is something that I think is important to look at. Things like it would be tough to put classrooms above a music room and a cafeteria just based on the sound uses of the other areas, but I just wasn't sure if that was something that was looked at during the process.
I'm not a nuclear engineer, but I do have 2 degrees from MIT, so.
There you go, you're good.
Right, so, and an MBA as well. So the issue becomes here, what is the cost benefit of planning for the future? How much can you put in the ground now anticipating a second story? Most schools will not do that because you have to move all the HVAC off the roof. They don't want to spend the money on the foundations because something may never occur. If you look at the study being done, as I said, 10 and 20 years out, the enrollment is not driving this. It is the programming and the way you teach now. There may be a slight increase in which we can accept that. We have that flexibility. But if you get another 100, 200 students, this blows apart. So there is flexibility, there is expansion potential, but it's not designed to go up right now because you would spend too much money in the structure. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Anybody have something new to offer regarding the bond issue? We're starting to rehash things. Does anybody have something new to offer that want to speak to the bond issue? I recognize Caitlin.
I just want to confirm, it is hampsteadschools.net. That's where everybody can go. It's all right there.
Mr. Moderator?
And I recognize Karen Yasenka to speak.
I would just like to give the other members of the construction team an opportunity to speak. If there's a question that hasn't been asked and there's something you think you might want to address, for instance, it wasn't mentioned this year, but it was mentioned last year, and it was very important to parents. I was wondering if one of you could come up and speak to the safety precautions that will be in place if this passes while construction is going on. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Keith McBay. I'm from Bonnet, Page & Stone. We're construction managers. I've got with me Barrett Salta, our vice president. So as we work through this, our charge initially to date has been to work on estimates and budgets. Pending a successful vote, we would continue to work with Craig and his team to assure that design matches available funds. And then as we get closer to construction, we'll develop what we call a site safety and logistics plan. And with that, we'll identify and separate the construction operations from the educational and recreational activities of the school, assuring that we've got a safe atmosphere there right through the process. We'll be doing background checks for everyone on site. We will work through hard fencing designated storage areas. Construction sites are fun and they're kind of an attractive nuisance, so we've got to separate our materials and activities from the educational end of things. We'll work on delivery timing and like that. And we'll work with your local law enforcement and fire through that process to be sure that while that construction activity is going on in your school, it's not only separate, but the building is safe for all the occupants during that time period.
Thank you. Anybody else want to talk to Article 2 of the bond issue? You stood up, man. You want to talk? No. Just taking a break. Okay. See no one else that wants to speak? I don't see any raised hands. So what I'm going to suggest now, that Article 2 is hereby moved to the Tuesday, March 12th secret ballot. So go on to the next article. Article 3, the operating